Welcome to Directionally Correct, the People Analytics podcast with Cole and Scott, live from SIOP, with Tony Ferreras, Rob Stilson, Emily Pelosi, Kelsie Colley, and Amy Stevenson.
Thanks to our sponsors, Lightcast. The world is full of talent data, but more data can lead to more questions, uncertainty, and stagnation as organizations sift through it to figure out what's fact from what's fiction. Lightcast's talent intelligence platform answers your most difficult workforce questions to drive meaningful business results. With more than 20 years of experience as MC in burning glass, Lightcast accelerates your work, bringing together hundreds of billions of vetted, constantly updated data points and incredible insights to drive strategic talent decisions. Your organization can tap into the deepest open repository of skills, supply, and demand data in the world to transform your hunches into a skills-based future for your organization. Lightcast's flexible solution, used by 67 of the Fortune 100, can integrate your own data, be guided by in-house talent experts, and give you the tools and confidence to explore it for yourself. To learn more, book a demo at lightcast.io. All opinions are our own and do not reflect those of any other organization.
So when I was on the podcast in the past, I accidentally got looped into talking about aliens on accident. Do you remember this?
That was not an accident. That was like one of my favorite topics.
And I'm so disappointed because I brought a little blow-up alien doll for the two of you to take back to your office, but it's up in my hotel room. So before you leave the conference, you can put it on your desk and remember the strange conversations we've had about aliens and analytics.
Well, let's lean into this. So who at this table believes that aliens are real?
Oh, God.
That takes up too much mental space for me. I can't.
I'm definitely in the aliens are real camp. Rob, have you had any experiences with aliens?
Amazingly, no. The odds seem to be slanted in my favor, but I've never actually met any of the visitors.
That you know of.
That's true. Yeah, they may walk among us, but I believe they're out there. I just don't know if they've been here yet.
Well, there's the mathematical formula that you can perform to determine how many civilizations would exist, right? Mm-hmm. And it's what percentage of the planets are inhabitable worlds, how many would advance to enough civilization sophisticated enough to space travel, etc. Times how many galaxies, billions and trillions of galaxies are out there. So mathematically, it has to be true.
It has to be. If there's life here, there's got to be life other places. I had this idea the other day. Tell me what you guys think about this. What if there were actually aliens on Venus, but they exploded a bunch of nuclear bombs, and that's why Venus is uninhabitable?
That's what you think about?
These are the things I think.
It's kind of heavy for, 7:15 in the morning. That's part of the Great Filter, right? Where they advance just far enough to destroy themselves before they can get faster than light travel.
See, what you guys don't realize is we talk about so much baloney on here, and it just doesn't make it past editing. You just keep the good stuff.
Yes.
But you don't have that option today, sir. So.
Oh, yeah. These poor saps, they can hear you.
But this is the all-star crew. We hand selected each of you because we had so much fun when y'all joined the first
No, you
time.
knew who would be responsible and show up. That's exactly
that
what
too.
we have here. Be truthful.
Who is likely to say yes?
So I got a question for you guys. Why? It's really easy to kind of, as your career progresses, to get less and less involved in SIOP because just life gets busy. Why do you guys stay involved in SIOP?
It's a good question.
Yeah. Please don't all.
Why are you looking at this end of the table?
Well, I'm looking down here so he can kind of take that out.
Oh! I didn't know we were dividing and conquering.
Happy to jump in if y'all want. As being teacher as well, I really want to be able to make those connections for my students and then help to kind of get them into the places that they need to go as well, or if they're trying to transition careers or just meet new people. That way it's a lot easier for me to make that introduction, whether in person or via email. And that's why one of the main reasons that I was involved.
Just to make connections for your students.
That's a big reason,
yeah.
But also y'all are fun and return my emails. So
the parties too, right?
Yeah, the parties.
Yeah.
No, that's fantastic. It's definitely the people, right? Like, the sessions are great. The research is great, but like getting to see everybody and old friends, new friends.
Yeah, I think the sessions are higher quality compared to other conferences that are more like vendor-led. Like, I know I'm going to learn something if I go to SIOP, especially if I go to like a session before, like a workshop or something like that. So I don't want to be redundant and say the people. I'd say that's the first thing, but also high quality conference content most of the time.
I think for me, it resets me to the great ideas that IO produces, because being a practitioner constantly, you get, I believe I get jaded, and I forget some of the great things that we've done in the past in IO. And while I think a lot of the things that we do here need to be translated in more practical terms, it's a great opportunity to just reset, come back with these great ideas, implement them, try to implement them at your organization, and be the hero.
Yeah.
All right, everybody's looking at me. So I'll add to that and say that, being a practitioner is, apart from listening to y'all's podcast and the nerdery, we plug there, it's easy to not create the space to keep up with research, right? You get lost in kind of like doing your job day to day and executing and things like that. And so resetting, it's also a way to kind of like say, okay, I need to like focus my focus time for the next year. Like, where do I want to kind of spend my time getting up to date on research and kind of staying, in line with academia and what's going on? Because it's difficult when you're in the day-to-day as a practitioner to make space for that.
Is there anything you've seen that you like want to take away from this conference? Like something specific? Like, a new insight, a new like methodology, anything? Granted, we're only on day 2.
Yeah.
Yeah?
I've gotten several anecdotes of what has worked or not worked. So it'll be a session about something, and then they'll do a deep dive into, and we tried this, and this is what happened, and it didn't work, or it did work. But I'm trying to become a better storyteller as well, because I'm like, numbers. And
right.
everybody's, what is it? They don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. But being able to bring in all of these stories that have worked other places or didn't work, and then people can sort of relate to it better, and then it's just easier to build those relationships and try to, get stuff going.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one thing.
Yeah. Two of our previous guests, so Daniel Smerling and Emily Campion, were on a panel yesterday. And I don't know if I necessarily learned something from this, but I thought it was a good point of debate, where one of the panelists brought up that all the junior IOs in the room, like a lot of their work was going to be completely automated by AI, and so that they might as well not even worry about learning all this stuff. And I think Daniel took issue with it. And so I think that's kind of, I don't know, a point of debate, like, what are the things that are worth knowing as scientist practitioners? Like, what are the things that are going to go away? Like, where do we really need to focus and lean in and stay relevant? I know these are big questions, and I feel like these are the communities that have to drive answering those questions.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, and I'm always very polite to my Gen AI, please and thank you, and maybe I'm the one who programmed it, and if not, if they put in, hey, who keep here, then maybe it'll leave my name up top and say, this city needs to stay for the shot.
Well, I mean, that's true. Like, the world's changing, right? Like, 2 years ago, we never heard about Gen AI. And now it's everywhere. How is this going to change the way we work in the future? What do we need to know?
I mean, let's ask the provocative question, like, does SIOP exist in 10 years? Right? Do IOs exist in 10 years?
What do you think?
I think we should all become bricklayers. I'm kidding. No, the parts of it that, we've talked about this before.
Yeah.
It's the synthesis parts that I think we play a role in. It's like, if you get really, really good at some narrow task, well, AI is really, really getting better at really, really good at narrow tasks. but it's the things that cross boundaries that are synthesis mechanisms and anything related to critical and analytical thinking. I think that's where humans, augmented by AI, are going to be doing much more important work.
A while ago, we mentioned, like, what do we get out of SIOP? It's a lot of people things, right? I think that that's not going to go away either. It's become mildly more important to be able to relate to other people. You know, communication skills, which I lack right now.
Yeah.
It's too early.
This is painful.
It's warming up.
I think AI really helps IO. I think it's going to propel us forward, really, because a lot of the content that AI is going to answer with for those who are not IOs is going to be our content, right? And I think it puts it forward more than I think we can, because there's only so much of us. But AI is, we can think of AI as an honorary PhD in IO, putting the stuff that you created forward to these practitioners.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I mean, I can't predict the future, but I think reasons why SIOP would still be around in 10 years is because what I notice is at least some of the unique perspectives that IOs bring to these discussions are around things like construct validity.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think we talk about that enough when we're talking about using NLP and building taxonomies. Like, how do we know what we're actually measuring, especially when we're scraping with passive data sources and saying that that's measuring constructs like engagement that are deeply researched with survey items. But now, effectively, we're using words to measure those things. So that's just one thing I've been spinning on a lot recently. But then also like a data privacy and an ethics issue. I mean, I think IOs are also more like primed to bring up that kind of thing. Like, is it okay to use this data in this way? What are the implications? How are we building trust with the people that we're using this data and taking it from? So I'm hopeful we'll still be around for a bit.
Yeah, I agree with everything that you said. In addition, I love that we've opened SIOP to non-IOs, and I think that they're going to help bring in, like, hey, there's this train coming down the track. Y'all either need to get on it or move, and that way we can adapt as well. So having those different perspectives while still maintaining what's unique to IO, I think is going to make us even better.
I'll add to that. We were talking about this last night at dinner a little bit, but we're getting now a seat at the table, I think, in organizations in a way that we weren't in the past, because there's a recognition that we do bring a unique perspective. So we were talking about governance councils around AI. We're actually getting to participate in those, whether it's the chief data officer, CIO, whatever. There's a recognition that they need a voice like ours, protecting the employee base, right? Because a lot of times we pilot things internally before we decide to leverage them broadly. And so, that has to go through HR to make a decision about whether or not that's, a valid use case and, acceptable level of risk. And so there's interesting conversations where we're getting brought in, I think, where we weren't in the past. So I'm also hopeful that IO's getting new seat at the table. And I was also sharing that, at least in my field, right, I work in the tech industry, we're actually getting brought in to consult on like product development, because there's a recognition of employee experience and what we can bring to bear, like go to market, right, with products, and bringing that kind of lens from a development perspective. So I think we've got a lot of different really interesting tracks to pursue as IOs in the future. Maybe aren't as traditional.
And I want to come back to this point about expanding SIOP, expanding IO psychology, because if you kind of go back to the provocative question of like, does IO exist 10 years from now? I think it exists in partnership with other disciplines. So if you look at our history of podcast guests, like we hosted this dinner last night and I invited a bunch of people that had been previous guests on the podcast to it. Half of the people there were not IO psychologists. If you go down the list of the previous Directionally Correct guests, it's an intentional fact that over probably half of them have been non-IO psychologists, because we, like, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. We're not partnering with data scientists. We're not partnering with other disciplines. We will, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu, as the old expression goes. And so how important is it to you guys to expand the reach of SIOP, to make sure that it's welcoming to non-IOs. That, I mean, obviously we've got the parties, we've got the grad school things, like, yeah, those might get a little, we like talking to each other, it's fun.
Well, even you had some consternation that SIOP was getting too academic.
Oh,
right? Yeah. You thought that it didn't really apply to practitioners, but it's kind of coming back the other way.
Well, the thing I see from it is it's actually incumbent upon people like the folks on this stage to keep the scientist practitioner model alive, right? But it's not just enough to be the practitioners who are working with the scientists. I think it's practitioners working with scientists who are working with practitioners from other disciplines. I think it's a three-legged stool. And so I really think that that's the future of biopsychology. If it's going to stay relevant, if it's going to be around in 10 years, it's got to be that model.
I definitely think that SIOP is becoming more approachable for non-IOs. Over the years, it has become more relevant, timely with our topics and such. One of the things that I think in the future we could adapt to is to be more approachable is, well, let me say it this way. Whenever I go to a session, I notice that it feels like everybody or the presenters are trying to prove to each other that the how was the right way, that what they did to get to the outcome was the most important thing. Proving to each other, to ourselves here, was the most important thing to the research, when for a practitioner, for someone out in the field, for a non-IO, really it's the outcome. And a lot of the concepts that I think we've worked on that perhaps others in non-IO have taken and made sexier and it's become popular because they focused so much on the outcome versus how we got there. And I think we're getting better at this. But to make it more relevant, I really think, the how is important, but let's make the outcome, the output, what it is that we've created or that we could impact much more approachable. Yeah.
I agree. I have we're trying to kickstart a little people analytics meetup in the Denver area. So if you live in Colorado and want to come say hi, please connect with me. But one of our goals for next year, because SIOP will be in Denver, is to have a panel that is less IOs and more non-IOs. Mm-hmm. And I want that discussion to be essentially, what are the biggest barriers from an outside perspective when you communicate with us at either an internal consulting perspective, people analytics team perspective, or even just trying to read our research. What is the point that you reach where you're like, this is not helpful for me? And so I wanted to bring some folks in that partner with IOs in the past or want to, and really bring to life, what does it mean to be a partner of an IO psychologist? So hopefully the People Analytics Denver group can do that next year and start the conversation in a more constructive way. Build some solutions.
It can't be preaching to the choir, right?
Yeah.
Like, how many non-IOs are in the room right now?
Yeah, raise your hand if you're not an IO psychologist. I mean, I am.
You got a handful.
Got a handful. And of that group, I just want to point out, of that group that raised their hand, I think 2/3 of them, if not more, have been previous guests on our podcast.
Well, I think we should take a moment and appreciate, we are doing a lot better than we used to.
Yes,
I used to
absolutely.
think a lot about how IO psychologists had a big marketing PR problem, and I think we still have some challenges with that, but there's this podcast, there's so many podcasts out there, I know Adam Grant's is a big popular one, those types of things are giving us more attention, and to Anthony's earlier point, making things more accessible, so we should appreciate at least where we are today compared to maybe 10 years ago.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, I want to come back to Anthony's point here for a minute about not just focusing on the how, but focusing on the impact. All of us were classically trained in how to do research in the workplace, but that research didn't necessarily focus as much on what do you do with the research. It was more of research for research ends unto itself. How do you conduct effective research in your workplaces that does make an impact on the business? And I feel like this is the $1 million question, but I think we've got the right people to answer it.
I know this is super probably rudimentary, but honestly, it's sort of reorienting folks, at least on my team, to the scientific method, and I know that sounds
Yeah,
kind of funny,
absolutely.
but it's like when you have that as your framework for exploring your day-to-day work and like, you know, kind of guiding like how you approach defining a problem, that's really, really critical. And I think people jump to like trying to action. There's a bias towards action in business, and it's like, wait a second, take a beat and figure out like frame it from left to right. And you know, it's not, you know, sexy to your point. It's not like, but the more you kind of orient people to like thinking about, you know, like your day to day and using that as a framework is then like really helpful. And people laugh, right? So we'll do offsites and we're like, okay, let's go back to basics and like walk this through. Let's go back to having great science class. But it's so funny because then when you like go through use cases and sort of like make people use that frame, like I kid you not, we've done that and it's like lots of giggles. But at the end, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I should be doing this in my day to day, and it's really good frame.
Well, you go back to, you know, what skills are not going to go away from IO. Those first few weeks that you spend in like research methods, super critical. Apply to everything. You know, just like randomized groups, you know, have a control group. Because you'll see some crazy shit in an organization, right? Mm-hmm. You'll see like, just like, oh, we're just going to test like the highest performers and like we proved something went right? So that's where the IOs can step in and say like, no. Let's get.
On a side note, I was talking to some folks at SIOP leadership because I was like, you know, we curse on our podcast, right? And like, what is the amount of cursing that will get us kicked out of SIOP? And so they said, use it lightly, like salt and pepper. So I was like, all right, so we're gonna salt and pepper this a little bit. We're not gonna overdo it.
We got 3 more curse words in. That's
All right.
Choose them wisely.
I like a lot of salt, so I might be in trouble.
There we go.
I think another way to approach this too is to ask your internal partners outside of HR and people ops, how confident are you in what you know? There's nicer ways to ask than that. So I would start there. Like, are you really confident in this? Like, what can we confidently say? So typically, like a couple of slides into my decks that I give out to other folks is, I just put what we confidently know in there, and oftentimes there's not much to say, and I think that really sets the stage for why the rest of the deck or presentation or our engagement is critical for their business. And then also, if you're able to, I think, like we were talking about product development, I was working at Zoom for a while, and we had never really studied how Zoomies use Zoom, and you'd think to yourself, maybe we should just start studying how internal employees at Zoom use Zoom.
Yeah.
And it changed the way our offices were laid out. It changed a lot of our product iterations, and that came from someone in people operations, and they had never seen that before. And it's just, I mean, it wasn't, nothing advanced was happening. It was just a list of ideas that came through from open-ended questions and some very simple correlations. So if we're able to sort of design our work, it doesn't have to be super fancy, but if you can connect it to anything else, folks start to listen, and then you can go back and say, okay, have you thought about this from an IO perspective?
First of all, I've never heard the term Zoomies, but I love it. But I love that approach, and I've taken a similar approach too, especially when you have a research project with a long tail, and you need to demonstrate, like, okay, here's why concurrent validity won't really cut it. We actually should do some predictive analyses and wait. So we're not going to get the answer that we really want for like 3 to 6 months, maybe even to a year. Like, that's a really hard sell to make. So breaking things down in phases and saying, here's what we learned in this phase. Here's why that's important. You know, we can stop there, but here's the risk. Here's what we don't know yet. So I love that you're starting with like, here's what we can confidently say today, and kind of like creating that platform for like, all right, here's really why we should invest a little more. And the only thing too I would add to this is just staying maniacally focused on the question you're answering. Mm-hmm. What question is the business asking? And it's not always the question they're telling you. So I like to go through maybe some scenario playing too, like, all right, so let's say we found XYZ. Like, what would you do with that? Like, what's the action you're taking if we found this versus that? And that helps you also kind of figure out, like, is this worth my time? Mm-hmm. Or am I just kind of confirming something they already know?
It's called reducing lazy asks. I love that. And it is. It's true, because like, you know, you will get handed a million different like symptoms instead of like, you know, actual problems, but you have to reduce the lazy asks, and people need help with that sometimes, I think.
So how do you sift through that?
What's that?
How do you sift through that?
I mean, sometimes it's just like, no. I mean, you know, I mean, I say that jokingly, but, you know, we do have a responsibility to not be order takers, I think.
Yeah, of course.
And so there's, again, a little bit of that, making sure you are, showing up as like an authority, like, no, actually, you're talking about a symptom, not the problem. Like, let's explore this and get to the root of what you're trying to, like, understand. And so sometimes it's saying no or helping people clearly see, like, oh, they're just sort of chasing, some smoke.
Well, we have the responsibility not to be order takers, but there's another side of that equation, which is we have the responsibility to be leaders and business savvy individuals, because if we're not, we will just be order takers. Right? You have to position yourself in that way.
And then also, in addition to focusing on what's actually going to make a difference for them, what's keeping them up at night, just how do we get there? Do we have what we need? Can we get what we need? And if not, what can we do from there? But keeping the end in mind, and then sometimes working backwards and seeing how can we make the biggest impact in the shortest period of time, or if it's going to take longer, just setting those expectations, but also bringing a point of view. And I know as a psychologist, this is really hard, but if I walk in and the answer is always, it depends, then they might not invite me back. So, here's the action I recommend now. It might not be rock solid, but it's the best we've got with the evidence we've got. And at least we're going to get some action going, and then we can kind of tweak it as we go if needed. But just, we're doing something.
I think this... Go ahead.
It depends.
Yes.
Well, I love everything that everybody said, and typically the way I summarize this is it has to deal with relevancy, and that's really the word that I like. And summarizing a lot of this is when I think of the scientist practitioner model in the business, in the company, it has to deal with relevancy. I love the thoughtfulness, innovativeness, creativity of the scientists, and that's absolutely needed. But we need to be agile, quick, be okay with less rigor, but alignment to the business. Time is incredibly important, and like somebody else said, it was Emily, time is incredibly important in a business. And a lot of the great ideas that we have often require a lot of time. So unless we can be very, very proactive and predict what it is that we need to predict. We need
Meta prediction.
What's that?
Meta prediction.
Meta prediction.
I think this, as a more junior people analytics professional, I think it's so critical to have a good manager in place to make sure that you're not just getting these fire drills, these urgent requests for just to me seems like random questions, like how much turnover did we have last year in July?
Yeah.
You're like, well, what are you going to do with that information? And sometimes you have to say, just go to your peer or your mentor or your manager to say, like, is this worth my time? And if they're a good manager and they know where we fit in the org, they can say, no, you're not doing that, and take that off your plate. So if you have a strong relationship with the manager, that's so helpful. And I think, too, the second piece is you can also say, like, what I try to say is, you don't actually want me doing that with my time. And that's hard to do as a more junior professional as well. And just say, like, trust me, you don't want me to spend my time doing that. Have you thought about this? Or yes, we've got something, the dashboard will be updated in 6 weeks, and I'm not in control of that, so it's coming. But I definitely agree that the exchange experience is really difficult sometimes between just asking simple questions to you, and you're like, there's so many different questions you should or could be asking in different ways to display it back to you. So relying on good leadership and management is the way I've been successful so far, and I've also been very lucky to work for great professionals in people analytics.
Are you familiar with the hug of death?
No.
Thank goodness.
Ew, here we go. This is going to be awesome.
We would try to avoid the hug of death, where we would do something great with people analytics, but then we would be very careful to roll it out because is this scalable? Because the hug of death is, this is amazing. I'm going to do it 1,000 times.
Yeah.
And, they love what you did, but they're going to bury you with that work. So having that manager in place to kind of shield that is good. And then, are y'all familiar with the Find a Rock exercise?
What, one more time, what was that?
Find a rock.
Is this phase 2 of Hug of Death research?
It can be. Making sure that you're not on a Find a Rock operation where you come back to like a VP or something, you say, is this the rock you're looking
No.
for? Does it look similar to this rock? Is it a stone? And that can just eat up a ton of time. So yeah, trying to block out the hugs of death and the finder rocks is it's what a good manager does.
I
love
would
that.
expand that to
I
pet
would-
rocks. Pet rocks.
I would love to see a show of hands. How many people, like in a people analytics role or otherwise, have taken a job and been really excited and then been inundated with very transactional requests?
Oh yeah.
It's everybody.
That's what I thought. So we all experience this in one form or another. And I remember I had a manager who framed it for me like this, like, Emily, the same people that are asking you for reports and all this garbage are also the people that at the end of the year are going to say, man, I wish I had more of a thought partner. So that was a really good way of just thinking about why it was important for me to say no.
Okay, I like that. Like the answer cannot always be no, right? You need to like get to the actual nuggets that are actually going to be valuable.
Well, I think this actually goes to Kelsey's point, about being a junior person and learning from more senior people in the field. It's like, it wasn't that long ago that everyone that was on this stage was a graduate student, right? And presumably, all of us, with the help of others, learned to navigate to how to be a thought partner. This is a very doable thing, but it's doable when we stick together, when we learn from each other, when we build on the learnings from the past, and we avoid things like hug of death.
Mic drop.
That was not meant to be that. I'm wondering here for a second, one of the things that we wanted to talk about today, and we've kind of touched on it a little bit, is the science practitioner model, right? So how, from all the people on this stage, I'm just going to make the assumption that you are good scientist practitioners because you're here. How do you maintain and be a good scientist practitioner in 2024? Because you're not in grad school anymore.
That's a great question. I'll just throw Gen AI out there, and I've gotten a lot better at chat prompting and, give me an 80-20 approach on how I become amazing at this in 1 week, and then it kind of lays it out for me, but also just paying attention to some of those that are leading the industry, how are they doing it, and just trying to stay relevant, networking with a lot of people of, hey, in the last month, what did you come across at the school, and are you going to apply it to your work, and how are you going to do that? So keeping those lines of communication open, and then also respecting the robot overlords.
I'll add to that because this is something that we have practiced, fallen off a little bit lately, but being really intentional about the reach out. So for me, it's not every Friday, but Fridays. I sort of, I'm very intentional about blocking 4 hours, on Fridays to do reach out, connects with, whether it's colleagues, long-time colleagues, or frankly, sometimes I will use part of that time to go through my LinkedIn inbox because I'll be honest, there's just so much that comes in, and I'm sorry if I haven't responded to someone out here because it's very likely. But sometimes just going through and cleaning clutter out in that LinkedIn inbox and being like, oh, there are these 2 people, I really should get back with them and reach out and have a chat on XYZ. Sometimes Richard, I ping you on Fridays, usually, if you haven't noticed. But it's being intentional about that. That is a really important professional activity. And it feels indulgent, and it shouldn't. So I think there's a little bit of, for me, it's that approach of being mindful about connecting and having those conversations.
To jump on that as well, one of your previous guests, Rob Cross, he came to Atlanta to speak with us, and one of his things that he did is recommended setting a 7-minute meeting with those that you just haven't reached out to.
Yeah.
They're going to laugh at you, 7 minutes, what are we going to do? And he said most of the time you end up laughing like idiots the whole time, but you get back to them and you still build that. But I thought the 7-minute meeting was very interesting.
These are great suggestions. I'll just drop a super nerdy one. Once a month, I just read the abstracts of the latest issues of JAP personnel.
Yep.
Just to be like,
You're so diligent.
Are you kidding?
I try.
I'm with you. I will just cruise Google Scholar and see what you get.
Check it out.
That's kind of creepy.
Well, I had an epiphany yesterday. I do just kind of peruse research. I don't read it deeply. That's anything. But this is why I love the poster sessions. You just kind of like walk by, kind of like get a broad swath of all the things that are going on. I mean, sessions are great, and you get much more in depth, but you are stuck there for an hour on a specific topic, as opposed to like.
I was going down the escalator yesterday, and to where the posters were, and I was like, I bet you I'm going to see Scott down here. I see Scott, and he's just having the best time. Like, he's living his best life over there.
You're like the one guy asking the best student is like poking his toe because someone comes and asks a really deep question about research.
My favorite is like the shy grad student that doesn't want to actually answer any questions. That's the best. Then you go in on them.
Yeah, that's so great though. I mean, don't posters have the most work? Like, let's be
Oh,
honest. Like, those are the
oh
real
my God.
MVPs. Much love for the poster
Yeah, absolutely.
sessions.
We were all there one day.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I think another good example of using graduate students in a positive manner would be asking for their comps study materials. So if you think about a comprehensive exam,
yes.
I tend to do that to junior students at Colorado State University. I'm like, what do you know about this in the last 3 to 5 years? And they'll send you like the most relevant citations, metas, reviews, and then they have a summarized sheet, and then they also have some flashcards for you, and you're like, this is perfect. So if we could have a library of folks' comp exam.
That would be a fantastic SIOP mechanism.
Yeah.
That'd be wonderful.
Yeah.
Because it is so hard to keep up with current research, good research anyway.
So.
And some aspiring grad student out there, why don't you open source it? So we don't have to ask. Right?
Yeah.
And I bet you your colleagues across the whole country would very much appreciate you.
The professors are clearing at you right now.
No.
Well, do y'all want to talk about research roulette?
Yeah, let's do some confusion matrix.
The confusion matrix.
Anybody in the room a fan of the confusion matrix? No one.
No, but there we go. We got a couple. Okay, so this everyone can participate in this one. So I'm going to say 3 different research articles. 1 is true, 2 are fake, and your goal is to identify the real one.
Emily's going to get it because she reads JAP all the time.
Yes.
Oh no, I've set the bar too high.
I will say that none of these appeared in JAP. Okay.
Not a lot.
Okay, the first one is Cloud Shapes and Human Creativity, a Sky-High Study. This was in the Journal of Cognitive Research from Virginia Tech, published in 2022. Cloud Shapes and Human Creativity. Study 2, Do Gummy Bears Experience Fear? A Study of Candy Anthropomorphism. Journal of Experimental Psychology from Cambridge. Was this 2016? Or finally, The Office Candy Dish, Proximity's Influence and an estimated actual consumption. On estimated actual consumption. This is International Journal of Obesity from Cornell University. So once again, you got Cloud Shapes and Human Creativity. Second is Do Gummy Bears Experience Fear? And The Office Candy Dish, Proximity's Influence on Estimated and Actual Consumption.
And only one is.
One is real. 1 is real, 2 are fake.
I hope number 2 is not real.
This is like, have you heard the Wait, Don't Tell Me on NPR?
Yeah.
This
Yes.
is like that.
It's like a ripoff kind of. Yeah.
So that's the case.
So is
and
someone
then,
playing for us?
I think so. Oh, yeah.
Someone playing for us?
No. No, we won't call your cell phone and leave a voicemail or whatever they do as a prize.
Well, if it's like that, then the least likely is the one.
Least likely is number 1.
I never get it right. I think we've been doing this for like
No,
a
the
year,
least
and I don't
likely-
think I've ever gotten it right.
Cole does have like a surprisingly low batting average. It's wild.
No, I'm saying the least likely is probably the answer.
Is it?
Ooh.
So it
So
is the
number
gummy
1.
bears in fear?
Also, number 1 doesn't tell you what's happening. It just says clouds and creativity. There's no like colon and what happens after that. So that's my guess too. It's just we don't know what it's even saying.
Just
So
rip it out.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh, was that the cloud one? No, the gummy bear one.
Gummy bears in
Gummy
fear.
bears.
So you think
Gummy
gummy bear is real?
Yeah.
You think
I'm gonna go with clouds and creativity.
clouds are real?
I'm going clouds and creativity.
Throw the Office Candy Dish in there and hope.
Yeah, I'm with you in the candy dish. I
You
feel
can't
like
have 2. You have to pick one.
that's okay.
Okay.
Candy dish.
Oh, we got
Yes,
mimosas. Kristen told us at dinner she was going to bring mimosas, and I was like, sure you are.
Oh,
All right. Oh my
you.
God. You're welcome.
Thank you.
I'm a bartender.
thank you so much.
Thank you.
I have no cash on me.
Chin chin.
Cheers, everybody.
Yay.
8 a.m. style.
Little hair of the dog.
Well, we're not swearing, but we are drinking, so really pushing the limit of what gets you kicked out of style.
Shit, that's good. Oh, there you go.
So what is the correct answer?
Well, okay, who thinks number one?
I think number one.
That's the real one. Who thinks number two?
Is that the gummy bear?
Gummy bear is number two. And number three, who thinks number three is real? It is number three. It is the Office Candy Dish. Let's see.
An idiot.
Let's see. There was a main effects for both proximity and visibility. People ate an average of 2.2 more candies each day when they were visible. There you go.
I want to speak to this for a moment. So I worked remote for a couple of years, and I'll try to keep this short. And then I onboarded at a pretty nice place, and they had snacks in the office and food. And once you've been working remote for a while, you kind of forget what that's like. I think I drank like 15 bubbly waters a day, like 45 peanut butter cups, and
Yeah.
that makes total sense to me. Absolutely. At home, I would never do that, but there, I'm like, it's free. It's
I don't
right
tell
there.
people from Google don't get fat, right? You have to.
I
Free
was
food
very
all day.
satisfied with just eating and drinking like that. So
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah. I don't know.
That's how good the other benefits are to counteract the gym.
Oh, yeah. Well, you don't need that.
And then they don't have to deliver mimosas to your desk.
Yeah.
No, they do not. Good job, Chris. Any nerdery fans in the room? By round of applause.
The nerdery.
We have considered on and off going to full nerdery
All
podcast.
nerdery.
This is a running debate between Scott and I. It's like, should we just go all nerdery?
No.
But the thing we realized is like half the people that listen love the interviews. Half the people love the nerdery, and no one likes the confusion makers. So
Where do you start?
Let's- Because I think it's been kind of a running theme of the conference. Why don't we start with Dunning-Kruger?
Dunning-Kruger effect. Okay. Let's see. So this article revisits the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is, of course, the cognitive bias where low-ability individuals overestimate their competence. So recent arguments suggest that the effect is small and confined to a small segment of the population. So using polynomial regression and some other fancy regression stuff, the study contrasts traditional approaches, which was essentially breaking up the distribution into quarters and identifying overestimates or like differences in the estimates, and anyway, so they contrasted these two different things. So based on simulated data, the decay effect peaked at a 20-point overestimate for IQs around 55. So this is a very small portion of the population, and it diminished significantly as IQs actually rose. They back this up with actual data from the field, but overall the findings suggest that the Dunning-Kruger effect is only limited to a small sample of the population. At least for IQ, right? Like it's being tested on like a very broad scale. I'd love it to, or ability rather. I'd love to see this at a very more narrow scale, like Python coding or something like this, right?
Well, and there was that other article that we covered, I don't know, maybe it was a year, maybe even 2 years ago, but I think it's related to this one about the researchers who did the Dunning-Kruger effect actually overestimated their ability to understand the impacts of the Dunning-Kruger effect. And so it's like the greatest irony ever. And I think this is kind of a continuation of that research.
Well, interestingly enough, in this article, they found that when you analyze it in the traditional way that Dunning-Kruger did, you do find the effect.
Yeah.
But using this more rigorous approach, it dissipates all the way down to just lowest abilities.
I feel like the nerdery is like the Dunning-Kruger effect in reality.
How so?
Well, it's probably not as much you. I think I'm more bombastic. I'm just sitting out here saying like, this is absolutely what's happening.
I got you.
And I know nothing about it.
Well, it has truthiness to it. The
Yeah.
Dunning-Kruger is, it's sexy, right? No thoughts.
It just blew my mind with that. I'm still digesting. What does this mean?
Yeah.
My world
No,
has turned
so
upside
just so
down.
everyone knows, we had pre-work for this, and he sends out a 56-page article behind a paywall, like a whole email with a lot of dictatorial instructions, and I mean, we're just scared to, I don't know, say much about it.
I don't check my email.
That's another way of saying they didn't read it.
I actually can scan it, like I took her approach with JAP and everything else.
You guys work under this assumption that we read the article.
I threw it into ChatGPT and said, give me a summary, give me some consumable bullet points, and like 2 or 3 witty quips would be amazing as well.
I did the same thing.
Awesome.
Yes.
They need to do something with that, expand it beyond IQ to like skills stuff. Now that people, like, no, seriously, we have a lot of debates about this internally. You know, if you can go in with all the skills technology, no offense to any skills vendors out here, but like, I'm awesome at these 18 things, and you know, like, but there's no hip check or verification, whether that's through your manager or, you know, some other less subjective verification. But it's kind of interesting, like, how like off base is that from like a, you know, promotion standpoint, like, you know.
Well, it's kind of confounding evidence, because like we have the evidence that, like, say people of moderate ability will overestimate themselves. Like, they're not going to use, like, say, ChatGPT. They're not going to use other training devices to get better, right? But they greatly increase their ability using it.
No. Now I have so many questions. I'm questioning the whole thing. Like, what
Yes.
was emphasized in the original study? Was this one of those things where they had 40 people and did a t-test, and which is actually the basis of like a lot of these like core theories that people hold as gospel in psychology? I want to know.
It didn't say, but like, I'm guessing like a chi-square or something. Yeah.
We had an interesting, it was like a skills-based platform at a previous organization where you could put what you thought you were good at, and then if people agreed, they could upvote you. And it's like, okay, I'm awesome at this, I'm awesome at this, and long story short, I ended up getting full on humble pie and a little bit of crow. But it's like, oh, I thought I was amazing at this. Maybe I need to go polish the skills. But
that seems like a popularity contest, though.
It could be, yeah. It was nice to be able to find others in the organization where I thought that I was really good at something.
I'll upvote you.
Thank you. Yeah, it had, 100 more upvotes than I did in a certain skill, so I'd reach out to them and say, hey, can I buy you a coffee, or set up a quick meeting, and then how are you just wowing everybody else at the company with these skills?
They're bringing mimosas.
Yeah.
Mimosas
I've never heard.
Why don't we?
I just have to say that I'm very self-aware in that I'm not good at this segment, therefore I am not going to participate. So I think I would pass this test, I believe.
Fantastic. Why don't we?
It's actually good news, right? Like, when people apply for a job, they kind of do a self-assessment of their own skills. It suggests that they are accurate in their assessment when they go into it, right?
Yeah, but don't we know this from like the 360-degree feedback that self-ratings are notoriously inaccurate, right? So if you're self-reporting your skill level, it stands to reason that it's probably largely inaccurate, and according to things like the Dunning-Kruger effect.
It's not inaccurate. Other people are wrong.
Does anyone remember this from like normal psychology? Like if you're depressed, you're more likely to make the most realistic judgments about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's a nice thing.
So Eeyore was right.
You going to move on?
Let's do the next one. We're losing the thread.
This one is from Shane McKnight. Is Shane in the room?
Am I on the right one?
I see how it is then. I see how it is.
Is it the using?
Yeah, that's it. Okay. This is wild. So, using a sequence of life events to predict human lives. So, this explores how life events can be used to predict outcomes, leveraging NLP transformers. So ML has been used to study, analyze complex structured data. This research applies transformers to sequence life events, suggesting that events can be encoded in similar to text output. So they essentially had this extensive Denmark national registry of data of life events across the entire population. So we're talking like work events, like what kind of job you have, health data, like kind of procedures, and just a million different things in there. This is the 55-page article I do believe. So they had these NLP transformers to create embeddings to model the life trajectory. So what they found is really wild. Not only can life events be encoded, but they can also be used to predict life outcomes. So essentially you're on this trajectory, and the NLP models can be used to predict things such as early mortality down to the age of 30, as they showed in the article, and personality traits, largely introversion, extroversion, as well as a few other narrow things, but it's common. This is wild.
I studied occupational health psychology for a while, and I think this could be applied to like safety and risk. And that's the first thing I thought of is like, are people self-selecting into risky experiences, risky jobs? Are there ways we can sequence events in the workplace and personal lives that predict accidents or slip, trip, falls or deaths and stuff like that? That was my professional response to this article. The second thing it made me think of is, and this might not land, but there's a meme of Mary-Kate and Ashley, and it says one looks like they know when you're going to die, and the other one looks like they know how you're going to die. And so that meme came to mind immediately when I read this piece.
There's a narcissism, right? Like, you think that you're going to be different than everyone else. Like, I can drink mimosas at 8 a.m. It's fine.
Yeah.
It's all going to be good. But no, I guess there's like common trajectories.
I guess when I think about this type of research, I wonder if it's just going to get better and better and better at this prediction, or is there a point of diminishing returns? Like doesn't matter how much data you mash into the models. Like, how have you ever decreased error bars? I don't know.
It's like Westworld, right? Did they do this in Westworld?
Well, it's not too dissimilar from actuarial science, right? The insurance companies decide
good call.
Charge you, so.
Yeah.
This is a year old too. I mean, like.
Yeah, it's probably outdated already.
Yeah, absolutely.
And was it the whole country of Denmark that they got? It was like 6 million?
It was a 10-year span. I read on the airplane several days ago. They had a ton of data. I guess it's.
I'd be curious how it would generalize to other countries of the world. Denmark's a fairly unique place.
Well, I think this is kind of the holy grail for like IO too. Like you understand the employee trajectory across their career, right? You do organizational entry. These sort of events will lead you to, higher job level, promotion, whatever you want, and then eventually exit, right? Can you predict these sort of things and ostensibly interrupt them if you want to, or promote them? Yeah.
I'll throw something back your way. So let's say that you see that somebody has a 76% chance of leaving.
Yeah.
What do you do about it? Do you give them the old shoulder tap and say, "Hey, you want to talk about this?"
Yeah.
Or do you make it a broader scale intervention where you gather those that are maybe higher than average, or maybe it's just a random selection that includes those that are more likely to leave or have been deemed that way? So yeah, I'd be curious how you roll out that type of intervention.
Like attrition interventions are really wild. Like you're essentially asking a manager to have a very odd conversation with your employee, right? Like, like the model says like you're about to leave.
Do you hate?
Yeah. And the employee's like, what?
No, you're great.
The answer is yes.
So wait, you were using my data to figure that out about me?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I feel like there's like a free will versus determinism component to this, but the way I think about it is if these models get sufficiently good, like I always thought of the gold standard in research was longitudinal research. Like if you track something 10 or 20 or even 30 years and follow it up and you could really prove out causality on certain things, is this going to surpass that? Right? Do we need longitudinal research anymore if we get sufficiently good at predicting the future? I don't know.
Well, these models, you can't really say what they're seeing in the data either, right? They're getting so good and so complex that why is someone going to leave? Why would somebody die? Why would they do whatever, right? And is that, we go back to ethics that you were talking about. Is that ethical?
Yeah.
What do you think?
What do you do with? I'm thinking about the practicality of this information, knowing what are the things that you did that could lead to your demise. Would that make you a more boring person? Would you be less creative, take less risks, those sorts of things?
Yeah.
And then I also think about, like, at work, and I was thinking about this the other day around performance and performance cycles, and how often we try to fit performance under kind of a bell curve. But the purpose of talent management is to get people more productive, more higher performing, those sorts of things. So is the goal a bell curve, or is there a lean to the bell curve? And then what do you do after that? If you're trying to achieve some sort of standard curve, then you're changing then the goalpost and what it means to be higher performing. So eventually, does that actually do what it's intending to do if you know that information?
Can I ask a question here? Like, who takes issue with the whole idea of key talent? Because we've been talking a lot about this, from a performance management perspective, because it changes every year. Like, the factors, the variable, like, you check these like 4 boxes and you're a key talent. Well, that was different 2 years ago versus what it is now. And that has just been something that I think, especially analytics critics are like grappling with, because everyone's like, oh, why is analysis over time, right? You want to see my trends. It's like, yeah, but the indicator, what was 2 years ago is very different than what it is now. And so telling that story is really difficult. Anyway, that really sticks in my craw. So let's figure that out, like how
It's like a useful fiction,
Yeah.
It's like you probably don't want to have nothing.
But you also know it's just a farce, like in a way, right?
Well, like, to Anthony's point, like they think again, a star performers article, right? Like these are like unicorns out there, and they perform differently. Like they're outliers. Like trying to predict them and like model other people, mold them into this sort of thing. You can't.
There you go.
There you go.
All right, I'm going to hit on this last nerdy article really quick. We're going to talk about, and this is for the graduate students in the room, LLMs can now do regression in machine learning for you. So from words to numbers, large language models are secretly capable of regressor when given in-context examples. And so they use Llama, GPT-4, Claude 3, and it says they can do linear and nonlinear regression when given in-context examples. And so for those of you who are worried about how to code in R or Python, no longer.
I mean, it's outperforming gradient boosted models,
which are like considered the gold standard in these kind of open source competitions, as long as you're not using like deep neural nets and that kind of thing.
I'd be curious how repeatable it is. That's where I've run into issues with the LLMs, because when I set up machine learning, I set a seed, which means that if I need to take a random population, it will be the exact same random population every time. And if I send it to you, you would get the same random population. But with the LLMs, you can mess around with the temperature parameter to make it either more creative or less creative. But if I tell you this answer on Monday, and then it changes slightly on Friday, and then it changes again, then that feels like it could be a legal issue if you can't backtrack how you got it and why you got it.
Absolutely.
Did this have a different feel than all the other SIOP sessions you attended, presuming you attended any? You want more of this kind of stuff? Because if you do, give it a round of applause. All right, you heard it here, SIOP leadership, so the crowd has spoken. But for those of you who are listeners to the podcast, you've been listening to Directionally Correct, live from SIOP with Rob Stilson, Tony Ferreras, Amy Stevenson, Cole Napper, Scott Hines, Emily Pelosi, and Kelsie Colley. Thank you guys so much for coming.
Hey guys, Directionally Correct is dedicated to you, our listeners, to help educate and entertain you on how to effectively do people analytics. By supporting this podcast, you are helping us continue to provide valuable